In Episode 11, Define Meaningful Security Metrics and Track Outcomes, we focus on building a measurement system that actually influences how security decisions are made, not just how slide decks look. The promise is straightforward. You will learn how to frame metrics so they connect to real risk, real behavior, and real trade-offs, instead of becoming an exercise in counting whatever is easy to count. Many organizations are rich in dashboards and poor in insight, which is a gap you can close with careful thinking. When metrics are designed well, they help you explain where security is strong, where it is fragile, and what should happen next. That ability matters just as much on the exam as it does in a boardroom or a project review. The first practical distinction to master is the difference between inputs, outputs, and outcomes, so you do not end up celebrating empty activity. Inputs are the efforts you invest: training hours delivered, tools deployed, tickets opened, workshops run. Outputs are the immediate products of those efforts: findings raised, patches applied, tests executed, playbooks updated. Outcomes are the changes in risk or behavior that result: fewer high-impact incidents, faster containment, better design decisions, improved resilience. Inputs and outputs are easier to measure, but outcomes are closer to what leadership actually cares about. A mature metric set acknowledges all three but keeps its eyes on outcomes whenever possible. From there, it becomes important to select leading and lagging indicators that tie directly to concrete reductions in risk. Leading indicators tell you whether your activities are likely to improve the situation in the near future, such as the proportion of critical systems covered by automated security tests or the number of high-risk services adopting a hardened baseline. Lagging indicators reflect the results of past decisions, like the number of significant incidents per quarter or the frequency of repeat findings at audits. Neither type is sufficient alone. Leading indicators show whether you are on track, and lagging indicators confirm whether the promised benefits materialized. When both are connected to specific risk scenarios, you avoid metrics that look impressive but do not change outcomes. To keep this discipline grounded, you can apply the familiar pattern of specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, often abbreviated as SMART, to each metric you design. Specific means the metric describes one clear thing, not a vague category. Measurable means you can obtain the data consistently, not just occasionally when someone has time. Achievable reminds you to pick targets that stretch the organization without setting it up for failure. Relevant ensures the metric aligns with risk and strategic priorities rather than personal preferences. Time-bound captures when you expect to see movement, which turns a static number into a trajectory you can evaluate honestly. Anchoring measures to objectives, controls, and concrete stakeholder questions keeps your metric catalog from drifting into abstraction. Each metric should be able to answer, which objective does this support? Which control or set of practices does it reflect? And which person or group is supposed to act when this number moves? A metric about patch latency, for example, ties to objectives around vulnerability management, to controls describing acceptable patch windows, and to stakeholder questions about exposure to known exploits. When a measure cannot be mapped back to an objective and a question, it is a candidate for removal, regardless of how visually pleasing it might be on a dashboard. None of this matters if the underlying data is untrustworthy, so you must pay attention to data quality, lineage, and refresh cadence. Data quality involves accuracy, completeness, and consistency across sources, so that the same system does not appear with 3 different names in different reports. Lineage captures where the data comes from, how it is transformed, and who is responsible for each step, which helps you detect errors and explain discrepancies. Refresh cadence defines how often the data is updated and whether that frequency matches the decision cycles it is meant to support. When people understand and trust these aspects, they are far more likely to use metrics in serious discussions instead of dismissing them as just numbers. Establishing baselines and targets moves your metrics from simple snapshots to decision tools. A baseline shows where you are starting from, which can be humbling but is essential for honest planning. Targets describe where you intend to be by a certain time, grounded in risk, capacity, and business change. Between these two, you define variance thresholds that indicate when a deviation demands immediate action, not just a note for the next quarterly report. For example, a sudden spike in access control failures or a drop in detection coverage beyond an agreed threshold should trigger investigation and response. These thresholds turn metrics into early warning signals rather than static decorations. Because raw counts can mislead, you generally prefer rates, ratios, and trends that show performance in context. 10 incidents in a month may sound alarming or comforting, depending on how many systems you operate, how severe those incidents were, and what the historical pattern looks like. A rate such as incidents per 100 services, or percentage of critical vulnerabilities closed within service-level timeframes, gives a more stable basis for comparison across teams and periods. Trends over time show whether you are improving or regressing, which is more informative than any single point. When you present metrics this way, conversations quickly shift from arguments about size to questions about direction and cause. As your measurement system grows, you will often need to combine telemetry from multiple sources, which brings new risks such as double counting and survivorship bias. Double counting occurs when the same event or asset appears in different feeds and gets counted twice because identifiers do not match cleanly. Survivorship bias appears when you only see data from systems that are still in service or from events that were detected, missing a silent population of unmonitored resources or undetected issues. Being explicit about how datasets are joined, how duplicates are removed, and what remains unseen helps maintain integrity. Clear documentation of these choices is part of what turns metrics into evidence suitable for scrutiny. To keep metrics relevant, you must define ownership, collection roles, and review rituals that persist beyond the initial design phase. Ownership means a specific person or team is accountable for the correctness and usefulness of each metric, not just for generating a number. Collection roles clarify who pulls the data, who validates it, and who updates definitions when processes change. Review rituals, such as monthly metric reviews or quarterly deep dives, ensure that numbers are examined, interpreted, and acted upon instead of simply archived. This governance helps prevent dashboards from becoming abandoned once the initial enthusiasm fades. Interpreting metrics effectively also depends on simple narratives that explain why changes occurred and what should happen next. A chart showing improved patch compliance is more powerful when accompanied by a short explanation linking the change to a specific initiative, such as improved automation or clearer policy. Likewise, a setback in incident response time invites a narrative about staffing changes, new system complexity, or gaps in training. These stories do not replace numbers. They give them meaning and help stakeholders connect metrics to the lived reality of teams. Over time, narrative discipline prevents overreaction to normal variation and underreaction to emerging patterns. Any serious metric program must also look for unintended consequences, because people respond to measurement, sometimes in surprising ways. A metric that rewards closing large numbers of tickets may incentivize shallow fixes or over-fragmented work. A focus on low vulnerability counts might discourage honest reporting or encourage teams to push risky components into unmeasured corners. When you detect these patterns, the responsible move is to redesign or retire the harmful metric, even if it is popular or easy to capture. This willingness to adjust shows maturity and protects the integrity of your measurement system. A brief mini-review draws the threads together. You can define inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Frame metrics using the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound pattern, and link them to objectives and controls. You understand the importance of data quality and lineage, baselines and targets, and meaningful variance thresholds. You can explain why rates, ratios, and trends beat raw counts, and how ownership, narratives, and continuous tuning keep metrics alive and useful. Most importantly, you can recognize when a metric is no longer serving its purpose and needs to be refined or removed. This perspective equips you for exam questions that test your ability to design and critique measurement systems. The conclusion for Episode 11 is to focus your attention on a single metric that matters in your environment and make it better. That might mean tightening its definition, clarifying its data sources, expressing it as a rate rather than a count, or writing down the narrative that should accompany it in future reviews. The next action is to schedule a short review with the people who rely on that metric, share your proposed refinement, and agree on how it will be used going forward. With each iteration like this, your metrics move closer to tools that genuinely guide decisions, and your ability to reason about measurement in exam scenarios grows sharper and more confident. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.